Every video about Sigma females talks about the same things: her independence, her strength, her ability to walk away, her silence that unnerves people, her standards that most cannot reach. And all of it is true. Every word of it is true. But there is a side of her that those videos never reach, a part that exists underneath the composure, underneath the self-sufficiency, underneath all the things she has learned to do so well that most people assume she was simply born without the parts that make it difficult. She was not born without them, she learned to manage them, and the management costs more than anyone around her will ever know. This video is not about her strength, it is about what her strength is holding down. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the parts of the self that are pushed below the surface because they do not fit the image we present to the world, or the image we need to believe about ourselves. For the Sigma female, the shadow is particularly deep, particularly dense, because the qualities she is known for, the self-reliance, the emotional control, the ability to function without needing anyone, require the constant suppression of a set of needs, fears, and impulses that are just as real and just as human as anything she allows herself to show. She is not unfeeling, she feels everything. She has simply become so skilled at processing it internally that most people never witness it. The shadow is where everything she will not show you lives. And it is time to talk about what is actually down there. Eating others is something she has spent years convincing herself she has moved beyond. But the loneliness is there. It lives in the quiet after a day that went exactly right with no one to tell about it. It lives in the moments when something beautiful happens, and she reaches instinctively for someone to share it with, and then remembers that she has arranged her life in a way that leaves very few people close enough to reach for. She chose this. She chose it consciously, deliberately, because the alternative, the closeness that comes with risk, with vulnerability, with the possibility of being known and then abandoned, felt more dangerous than the loneliness. And most days, she still stands by that choice. But the loneliness does not disappear because she chose it. It becomes the price she pays without speaking it aloud, without allowing herself to name it. Because naming it would mean admitting that the self-sufficiency, as real as it is, has a cost she was not fully prepared for. The Sigma female's perceptiveness, her ability to read people quickly, to see through performances, to identify the truth beneath what someone is presenting, is one of her most frequently celebrated qualities. What nobody discusses is what happens to all of that perception when it is turned not outward, but inward. And when it is turned outward in its rawest, most unfiltered form, what it produces is judgment. She judges. Constantly. Precisely. Often more harshly than she would ever say aloud. She walks into a room, and within minutes she has formed assessments of the people in it that are frequently accurate and occasionally devastating. She notices the inconsistencies in what people say versus how they move. She clocks the performance behind someone's kindness. She files it all away and says nothing. And this creates a particular kind of internal isolation. Because when you see people very clearly, it becomes difficult to simply enjoy them. It becomes difficult to be fully present in ordinary human exchanges without a running commentary in the back of your mind that you cannot entirely silence. This is the shadow of her gift. The perceptiveness that makes her extraordinary also makes her lonely in crowds in a way she does not know how to explain. I need to stop here and say something that most Sigma female content will never say. Underneath the competence, underneath the standards, underneath the calm that she carries into every room, there is a fear. A specific, persistent, quietly devastating fear that she almost never speaks out loud because speaking it would feel like a betrayal of everything she has worked to build. The fear is this, that she is too much. That the depth of who she is, the intensity of her inner world, the complexity of her needs, the sheer force of her presence when she is fully herself, is more than any person can actually hold. That the reason she has been misunderstood, underestimated, left, dismissed, is not that those people were wrong for her. It is that she is simply too much for anyone. She does not say this, she has probably never written it down. She has constructed an entire philosophy of self-sufficiency, partly as a defense against this fear. If she doesn't need anyone fully, she never has to find out for certain whether the fear is true. This is her shadow, not her weakness, her deepest, most carefully hidden wound. The Sigma female's standards, for herself, for her work, for the way she moves through the world, are genuinely high. But if you look closely at the engine driving those standards, you will often find something more complicated than a simple love of excellence. You will find proof she is trying to prove something, not always consciously, not always to a specific person, but there is an accumulation of moments where she was doubted, dismissed, underestimated, told she was too sensitive or too intense or too much. That has calcified into a perpetual internal drive to demonstrate, through the quality of everything she produces, that those assessments were wrong. The perfectionism is her argument, and the cost of running this argument continuously, of never being allowed to produce something nearly adequate, of holding herself to a standard that moves just slightly ahead of everything she achieves, is an exhaustion she rarely acknowledges. Because acknowledging it would require admitting that part of what drives her is not pure self-belief, but the unresolved ache of not having been believed. This is perhaps the most tender part of the shadow. The Sigma female genuinely wants intimacy, not the surface-level kind, the casual closeness that requires nothing, but the real kind. The kind where she can be fully known by another person, where she does not have to manage how she is perceived, where she can stop performing competence and simply exist. She wants this, deeply. And every time it begins to arrive, every time someone gets close enough that real intimacy becomes possible, something activates inside her that feels like sabotage. She begins to test, even when she promised herself she wouldn't. She begins to watch for signs of the disappointment she expects. She creates small moments of friction that allow her to assess whether this person will leave, because she would rather know now than be surprised later. She is not doing this to be difficult. She is doing this because every time she has allowed herself to be fully known, it has cost her something. And the shadow does not forget what it learned. The shadow is trying to protect her. The shadow is also keeping her from the thing she actually wants. Carl Jung did not believe the shadow was something to be destroyed. He believed it was something to be integrated, to be looked at directly, acknowledged, and brought into relationship with the self, rather than hidden beneath it. For the Sigma female, the integration of her shadow means something specific. It means allowing herself to name the loneliness without immediately constructing a philosophical reason why it doesn't count. It means noticing the judgment and asking where it is coming from without turning it off entirely. It means sitting with the fear of being too much and asking honestly whether the evidence for that fear is as solid as she has been treating it. It means looking at the perfectionism and understanding that she has already proven everything she needed to prove, and that the continuing of the proof is no longer for her growth. It is for her wound. The shadow, when you stop running from it, stops chasing you. What it wants is not to destroy who she has built herself to be. What it wants is to be included, to be part of the whole person instead of the part that lives in the basement, making noise she pretends not to hear. Vess, and she is right, she does. But self-awareness that stops at the surface of what is comfortable is not the deepest kind. The deepest kind requires turning toward the things that do not fit the story. The loneliness that contradicts the self-sufficiency, the fear that contradicts the confidence, the need for intimacy that contradicts the independence. All of these contradictions are not failures. They are the texture of being fully human. The Sigma female who can hold all of this, who can be strong and afraid, independent and lonely, perceptive and still learning, done with the past and still carrying what it taught her. That woman is not broken. She is complete in the way that only honesty makes possible. And that version of her, the one who has met her own shadow and decided to know it rather than hide it, that is the most powerful version she has ever been. If this video reached something in you that you have not let anyone else reach, that is not an accident. Stay with us.